Invite viewers to post their location and local time. The flashing red and blue lights paint Maple Ridge Estates in a surreal glow, like a backyard fireworks show gone off 2 months too early. Inside his modest two-story home, David Peterson stares through the window in disbelief. His 3-year-old son Jake is happily glued to a cartoon about a singing puppy who wants to be an astronaut, volume turned down so low you could still hear the refrigerator hum over it. Yet outside, Patricia Hawthorne, HOA president and self-appointed sheriff of suburban decency, is flailing her arms like she's landing a plane. Patricia had been running the HOA for 7 years, which in neighborhood time felt like a century. She ruled Maple Ridge Estates with a pastel cardigan fist. People whispered that her husband Harold had lost his voice sometime back in 2015, surrendered to a life of nodding silently behind her. Patricia was famous for walking with a clipboard ruler and occasionally a magnifying glass. Neighbors joked she could measure your grass length faster than most folks could boil water. But it wasn't until Jake's cartoons became her new obsession that things truly spiraled. The first shot across the bow came as a sticky note. Neon pink. Teal vision volume exceeds acceptable HOA standards. Consider headphones for your child or face formal violations. David thought it was satire, maybe even a prank. After all, historians still argue whether cartoon ducks quacking in the 1930s ever counted as disruptive noise, but Patricia treated it like constitutional law. A week later, she upped the ante 7:15 a.m. on a Saturday, clipboard in hand, accusing David of excessive cartoon themes emanating from his home. Excessive cartoon themes. If you've ever debated whether SpongeBob is an existential philosopher, you know such matters are at best inconclusive. Her evidence. A blurry black and white photo of Jake watching television apparently snapped through their living room window. David's heart thudded at the realization she was photographing his child. He asked her flat out, "Are you seriously doing surveillance on a toddler?" Patricia simply adjusted her glasses, replying with that smug confidence only self-appointed rulers muster. By the 3rd week, she'd ordered a professional decibel meter online. Neighbors spotted her crouched at the end of David's driveway, scribbling into a spiral notebook labeled in bold Sharpie Peterson audio violations. One kid swore she even muttered about liberal media infiltration of our cartoons. Quirky tidbit ancient Romans actually complained about noisy fountains outside their homes, which proves humans have always found something to nitpick. But Patricia's complaints went beyond nitpicking. She was conducting a full-scale suburban espionage mission. David, ever the practical software engineer, responded not with yelling, but with quiet preparation. Months earlier, after a streak of package thefts, he'd installed security cameras. Now they captured Patricia's every trespassing step, every decibel reading pressed up against his windows. While she thought she was gathering evidence against Jake's cartoons, David was collecting his own archive of her harassment. He stored each pink sticky note, each typed violation, building a file thick enough to rival a doctoral dissertation, though one historians would likely argue had more slapstick than substance. The situation teetered on the absurd. A child's giggle track versus a woman's escalating campaign. A father's patience against an HOA president's obsession. And on that Thursday evening, when Patricia whipped out her phone dramatically declaring she was reporting an audio assault to 911, the stage was set for a showdown. 10 minutes after Patricia dialed 911, the familiar crunch of tires on asphalt signaled the cavalry's arrival. A patrol car rolled slowly into the cul-de-sac, its lights casting red and blue across the tidy lawns like a disco party nobody had RSVP'd for. 2 officers stepped out. Brandon Walsh, tall, with the weary patience of a man who'd heard every excuse in suburbia, and Maria Santos, sharp-eyed and calm, clipboard tucked under her arm. Patricia practically sprinted to meet them, her HOA rulebook clutched like scripture, Officers, thank goodness she declared, voice pitched so high it startled a neighborhood cat from under a minivan. This man is conducting audio terrorism against our peaceful community. His child's television is destroying our quality of life. Audio terrorism. If Shakespeare had been alive, historians still argue whether he'd have written a tragedy about HOA disputes, but Patricia was certainly auditioning for the lead role. David stepped out onto his porch, keeping his voice steady. "Evening, officers. My son's watching cartoons at normal volume. I've got security footage you might want to see." Jake, still in footy pajamas, peeked out from behind the screen door. "Daddy, why is the mean lady yelling again?" he asked. David gave him a gentle smile. "Go finish your show, buddy." "It's fine." The irony wasn't lost. Jake's tiny cartoon, barely audible Patricia's voice loud enough to trigger car alarms 3 blocks away. The officers listened politely as Patricia launched into a monologue about decibel levels, cultural pollution from foreign animation, and her presidential powers under HOA bylaws. Walsh raised an eyebrow. Santos asked David for the footage. That's when the evening tipped. Inside, the officer sat at David's kitchen table, sipping water, as he loaded the flash drive onto his laptop. Clip after clip played Patricia creeping into his flower beds, pressing her decibel meter against the glass, craning her neck to snap photos through curtains. One frame caught her stumbling into a rose bush, muttering about subsection 3.4. Another showed her blocking the driveway, lecturing invisible followers on her phone like a one-woman news broadcast. Each second tightened the officer's expressions. When the last clip ended, Officer Walsh let out a slow whistle. "So, ma'am, you called 911 to report a noise violation that doesn't exist while trespassing multiple times and photographing a minor without consent." Patricia, standing stiff as a fence post, huffed. "I reported an audio assault. It's my duty as president." "Ma'am," Walsh said, voice gentle but firm, "there's no such thing as audio assault from a television at normal volume. What there is, though, is criminal trespass, harassment of a minor, and misuse of emergency services." A small crowd of neighbors had gathered by now, whispering and chuckling, phones held up to capture the drama. One man muttered, "I told you she'd snap one day." Another whispered that even Roman senators had less ego. Patricia flipped through her rulebook, desperately trying to find her imaginary subsection. It was like watching someone search for a unicorn in a phone directory. When she couldn't, her face flushed crimson. "This is a conspiracy," she cried. "The HOA has authority. Section 12 says show me." "Section 12, Santos said calmly. Patricia's hands shook as she turned pages, finding nothing but landscaping rules and mailbox paint standards. The silence that followed was broken only by Jake's cartoon laugh track drifting softly from inside. Neighbors smirked. The irony was too perfect. For weeks, Patricia had tried to convince them Jake's cartoons were disrupting peace. In the end, her own shrill crusade became the real disturbance, and as the officers stepped back outside, the balance of power shifted. Patricia tried one last desperate maneuver, clutching her clipboard like a knight's shield. "You can't arrest me," she shouted, voice cracking under the weight of disbelief. "I am the HOA president. I have immunity." Officer Santos clicked the cuffs with a calm precision. "Ma'am, being HOA president doesn't make you exempt from the law. It just means you're in charge of potluck signups." The line earned a chuckle from the neighbors, though historians still argue whether laughter or popcorn consumption was louder that evening. Patricia's tirade continued as they guided her to the patrol car. "This is an outrage. The HOA will hear of this betrayal. You're all witnesses. Property values will plummet without my leadership." The irony. Her voice carried so far it rattled lawn ornaments down the street. Jake's television never stood a chance of being that loud. Harold, her long-suffering husband, pulled up in his sedan. Instead of outrage, his face showed relief. He mouthed a quiet thank you to David as Patricia was slid into the back seat, still clutching her rule book like it was the Magna Carta. By dawn, the news had spread faster than wildfire on a windy prairie. David's lawyer friend Tom Richardson called to say Patricia was being charged with trespass, harassment, stalking, and misuse of emergency services. Because a minor was involved, the harassment charge carried heavier penalties, up to 18 months in jail and fines approaching $30,000. Quirky tidbit: in medieval England, neighbors could be fined for disturbing the king's peace by banging pots. Patricia had, in a way, written herself into that same dusty history book. Sunday's emergency HOA meeting was a packed house. Even Patricia's allies, once loyal nodding heads, voted to strip her presidency. She rose dramatically, declaring, "You'll regret this. 7 years I gave you. Without me, chaos will reign." Then she stormed out, slamming the community center door so hard a framed photo clattered to the floor. The thud was louder than any cartoon theme Jake had ever enjoyed. Neighbors left with smiles that night. Some whispered about planting roses in David's yard as thanks. Others laughed that Harold might finally get a peaceful breakfast. And David? He simply tucked Jake into bed, kissed his forehead, and promised that no cartoon would ever get them in trouble again. Now the story softens, the flashing lights fade into memory, and the noise of Patricia's crusade becomes nothing more than a cautionary tale told in chuckles at block parties. The cul-de-sac returns to its quiet rhythm, sprinklers ticking at dawn, mailboxes shutting with a soft clank, children laughing without fear of clipboards in the bushes. The file of sticky notes and grainy photos sits in a drawer, evidence not of conflict, but of how far patience can stretch before justice steps in. David learns in those quiet nights when Jake falls asleep to the gentle hum of the TV that sometimes the world spins back toward balance all on its own. He doesn't need revenge or grand speeches, just the simple peace of a home filled with laughter, cartoons humming faintly in the background, and neighbors who nod in solidarity rather than suspicion. So let the night air settle like dust after a summer storm. Imagine porch lights glowing, soft conversations drifting on, warm breezes, and the sound of a child's giggle rising light as fireflies in the dark. No clipboard, no sirens, just calm. Sleep comes easy when the neighborhood finally remembers what peace feels like.